Hello, everyone. Welcome to our virtual recording of our LinkedIn I've signed up Now What workshop. My name is Cam. I am a career coach within the Career Education Unit in the Careers and Experience Department. Careers all around here at Western University. Today we're going to go through a bit about how to make your LinkedIn profile go from good to great, a few tips on how to use LinkedIn effectively. But before I get much further into what we're going to cover today, I would like to begin with a land acknowledgement. I acknowledge that Western University is located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape-Wauk, and Chinootan nations, on lands connected with the London Township and Sombra Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. With this, I respect the long-standing relationships that Indigenous nations have to this land, as they are the original caretakers. We acknowledge historical and ongoing injustices that Indigenous peoples, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, endure in Canada, and we accept responsibility as a public institution to contribute toward revealing and correcting miseducation, as well as renewing respectful relationships with Indigenous communities through our teaching, research, and community service. Thank you. As for what we are going to cover today, let's talk about your profile. As I mentioned, going from good to great to enhance your profile and to get to all-star status. We're going to talk about how to interact on LinkedIn, how to actually use it on a regular basis. I think the most common thing I hear from students when I talk about LinkedIn is, oh, I have a profile, but it needs to be updated and I never use it. A lot of folks tend to just use LinkedIn as an online version of their resume and then not really touch it outside of that. That's fine, but hopefully by the end of today's workshop, you can get an idea of just some of the ways you can use it, such as researching, using LinkedIn as a tool to research jobs, research employers, and try to help, figure out how to actually use it on an employment level. Firstly, though, before we get to any of that, we're going to talk about LinkedIn etiquette, what sets it apart from other social media sites and other networking platforms. One of the main things to consider about LinkedIn is that everything included on your profile is professional. I think given the pandemic, we are seeing a little bit of a shift in attitudes about what it means to be professional, what it doesn't, and some people are posting a bit more personal things on their LinkedIn, but I always think about keeping the tone professional. You can talk about something that's a bit more personal, whether it's a personal accomplishment or you want to post a picture of your family, that's still okay. But consider the tone of it, and that you are writing in a formal and respectful manner, even if the content itself is a bit more personal. You definitely still don't want to put stuff that's completely frivolous, maybe like posting about, going out to dinner or something that you might put on Twitter or Instagram. But for the most part, I think that tone is the important thing. Think about, would you want to have your grandma read that? If not, you probably shouldn't want your professional network reading it either. Another good tip, and this is probably, I think, one of the most important things that I think you could take away from this workshop, and that is that it is not weird or creepy or embarrassing to look at other people's profiles. Even if they are a stranger, it is not weird to look at their profile. That is the entire point of LinkedIn. This website was designed for people to be able to view their profiles, view other people's profiles, find new connections, grow and expand your network. Do not feel weird about viewing someone's profile. You might wish to keep yourself on private browsing, which means that when you view someone's profile, it won't tell them that it was you. It might just say someone at Western University viewed your profile, but then it won't tell you if they view your profile in return. So I recommend just keeping it on public because it's always good to see who views your profile. You might want to keep it on private if maybe you just signed up, your profile isn't ready to be seen by the world, but even then, I still hope that you can drop any sort of reservations about viewing people's profiles because again, that is the entire point of this website. Third and final piece of advice on LinkedIn etiquette is that if you are going to connect with someone, please add a note. If it's someone that you know pretty well, a classmate, a former TA, someone you went to high school with, a close friend, family member, then sure. You probably don't need to add a note if you would instantly recognize each other. If you're walking down the street and you'd wave to that person, then you don't need a note because the assumption is that they would instantly recognize you, you would recognize them, and that's all fine. But if it's anyone who you kind of know, but maybe not well, or it's someone you met once, add a note, and it doesn't have to be super thorough. Unless you have LinkedIn Premium, then you're going to be given a character limit anyway, so it can be something quick. And just say, "Hi, Cam. I attended your LinkedIn session today and found it really helpful. Hope to stay connected." That's it. That's all you have to do. Not too difficult, and it really does make a big difference if you say how you found their profile or why you're reaching out. Maybe you want to learn more about the tech industry, so you're connecting with a professional there, or maybe it's someone who you saw give a presentation or anything along those lines. It's just nice to have a note because getting random connection requests on LinkedIn can feel weird, as it can with any other social network. Viewing profiles of strangers is fine, but sending connection requests to total strangers with zero explanation, not the best LinkedIn etiquette. Now, as for your profile itself, if we want to move into the actual tips, I'm going to go through step by step in building your profile. And that is starting with tip number 1, upload an appropriate photo. There are a few things to consider when I talk about this. That is, number 1, having a photo just in general is important because you'll get a lot more views and a lot more engagement throughout your time on LinkedIn if you have a profile. I think it's something like 14 times more likely to get views on your profile if you have a photo than if you don't. So that's very important. And the other thing to keep in mind about a photo is thinking about what a typical LinkedIn photo looks like. I think everyone has a relatively good idea. Nice, smiling, headshot or, close around the chest, wearing nice clothes, no group photos, professionally taken, no selfies, something that's professional yet friendly and welcoming. The other important thing to keep in mind is about attire. It doesn't necessarily need to be full formal wear. The rule of thumb that I always go with is dress for whatever the expectation is in your field. So for example, if you want to work in finance, yes, a lot of people typically wear suits. Maybe you should have a suit in your photo. But if you want to work at an elementary school, for example, you want to go into early childhood education, you're wearing a full tuxedo, you might seem a bit overdressed or out of place for the field. You can look at people who currently work in the field or just base it on your own experience. Try to dress for what is appropriate. The only other thing I'll mention about photos, this doesn't get its own slide, but adding a cover photo or a banner photo is also a really nice touch. There are lots of good websites out there that will give you free stock photos, and it can be something that's as simple as a sunset or something generic, maybe, a banner of the company you work at, or if you currently go to Western, maybe a photo of campus. But I also think it can be nice to put something that says a bit about your field. So maybe if you work in tech, you want to have a photo of a motherboard or something, or a stock photo of some cables or computers. I don't know, I'm not in tech, but hopefully you get the idea. So upload an appropriate photo, consider uploading a banner photo. Not as important as a profile picture, but it really does just give your entire profile a sense of more completion. If you're a little unsure, maybe you have a photo that you aren't confident in, or you're stuck between a few different headshots, there are websites out there that can help you. This one, it's called photofeeler.com. Free to use. I wouldn't recommend any sort of paid service. All you have to do is vote on other people's photos in return, and this will give you some feedback on these 3 competencies, or I guess I should say qualities, because number 1, competent, 2, likable, 3, influential. You can see the photo on the left side towards the middle. That was my old LinkedIn photo. You can see kind of small, kind of blurry, a little bit outdated. It might have been taken when I was still a student, so I didn't look very competent. I didn't look influential. Apparently, I didn't even look that likable, which, first of all, ouch, but goes to show the value of soliciting feedback. The photo on the right is my current LinkedIn profile picture, and so you can see I got 60 votes on each of them, scored much more highly on the photo on the right, and so that is why I changed my picture, and that's something I wouldn't have known. So recommend this website. They also, if you want, can get votes for photos for dating sites if you're looking for that sort of thing. But if you set it to business, those are the three scales it'll measure you on. If you set it to social network or dating app, it will rate you on other things. So that aside, tip number 2, let's talk about your profile headline. This is the thing that people will see. They don't even have to click on your profile. This is the little pop-up you see beside someone's name and their picture. It'll give you their headline. And what most people have is the default one that LinkedIn will actually generate for you. It will pre-create a headline based on the information in your profile that it pulls, which is usually just your current position. So for a lot of people, it's student at Western University, junior analyst at RBC, but you can customize it, and there are a lot of different things you can include. Because if you think about taking advantage of LinkedIn, and that's, attracting people to your profile, growing your network, you can think about ways to entice people and make them want to click on the rest of your profile and make them want to learn more. So these are some of the things you can include. You can talk about your current role, of course. You can talk about your area of study, any top skills or areas of expertise, notable accomplishments, or if there are any goals or industries of interest you want to move into. So here are some examples. And you can see, Megan in the top left, Master of Media and Journalism and Communication candidate. Great, so you know what she's studying. Multimedia journalist, content producer. You know what she's about, the type of industry she works in, the types of jobs that she holds, or maybe jobs that she's looking for. A big thing to note about LinkedIn, and I'm going to come back to this a little bit throughout, is that it's really big on keyword searches. So if I'm a hiring manager who's trying to find people on LinkedIn, and I type in, I need a multimedia journalist, Megan's profile is a lot more likely to come up because she has that in her headline. Looking at John, for example, right beside her, mathematics major, great. That's, his current area of study, specialty in symplectic geometry. I have no idea what that is, but if I'm a symplectic geometrist and I'm looking to hire someone, John's profile is going to come up. And I also see that interested in using math in the real world, that's a little bit about his career goal, what he wants to accomplish. That's awesome. I'm going to want to click on his profile and learn more. So consider really taking advantage of the space in your headline to write some distinguishing things about who you are, what you want to be seen for, and ways to encourage people to click on your profile. Tip number 3 is the About section. We're progressing logically. You see someone's photo, you read their headline, you click on their profile, you scroll down, and the first thing you're going to see is the About section. You might see this filled out as just a 1 or 2 sentence objective statement like someone might have at the top of the resume, but they give you a crazy amount of room to work with on LinkedIn. I think it's something like 2,000 characters, so you're going to want to take advantage of that. Consider writing this as an advertisement to help people continue scrolling down, introduce yourself, write everything that your resume may not show off. Your experience and your education might tell one story, but talk about what got you interested in the field, or maybe a bit about how you ended up there. So if you want a few other prompts, you can talk about who you are, what you're interested in pursuing, what your career goals are. You can talk about your assets. Like I said, keyword searches, you want to be known for certain skills or roles that you take. You can put that in there as well, along with some personal details. This would also be the place to put in if you have any hobbies or fun things that make you stand out. You can put them in your About section. You might not put it anywhere else in your profile because it might not fit, because it's just formal volunteer experience and education and skills. But if you are an accomplished dungeon master who plays Dungeons and Dragons all the time, you can put that in your About section for sure. Here's an example of an About section that I really like because it's very neatly organized and it shows off a few of the different things that you could include. So you can see the first paragraph: recently graduated with a Master of Media and Journalism and Communication from Western. They graduated in June 2018 with a Bachelor of Arts in Digital Media and Journalism from Wilfrid Laurier University, along with a postgraduate certificate in Contemporary Media Arts. So instantly, I know this person's field, I know what they've studied, all their accomplishments, and then they say their goal is to further establish themselves in digital journalism, social media management, or communications, ideally in sports. So I know who this person is already, I know what they've studied, I know what they want to accomplish. Then beneath that, in bullet points, you can mix and match. They talk a bit about what are some of their accomplishments. They're, accomplished journalist with over 200 articles published, proficient copy editor, experienced social media manager, skilled videographer. And so if I'm looking for a videographer, that's going to come up because I searched that, it's in their about section. You see their specialties underneath, giving a sense of the types of things that this person can do, what they're known for as well. Keyword searches, if I type in social media strategy, that's going to come up because it's written in their about section. Then, lastly, link to their personal website, which I imagine is a bit of a portfolio. Also, a very good thing to look at or to include. You can also include maybe an email address if you want people to connect with you outside of LinkedIn, or if you have any other sort of website, links, etc. So really consider taking advantage of the about section and writing something a bit like this to explain what cannot be explained by just looking at your resume or every other piece of information that you include on your LinkedIn profile. Tip number 4 is the experience section. And you probably wouldn't be surprised if I told you that you should add your experience to LinkedIn. I think that and education are the two things that almost everyone is likely to include. But when you're writing your experience, you'll want to write them as accomplishment statements. If you've attended any of our other workshops or engaged in our other resources, you've likely heard of this before. If you have not, that's okay. An accomplishment statement is the way that you'll want to write the bullet points underneath the different experiences you have listed, rather than just listing out what your job responsibilities were. If you're a cashier at Walmart, you don't just want to have bullet point, work the cash register, bullet point, stocked shelves and greeted customers. You'll want to actually talk about what you accomplished, what impact did you make, what result did you have. So to do this, we have a fun little acronym called CAR, C-A-R. C stands for the challenge. Start brainstorming what was the challenge or the problem or the issue that you faced. What were you tasked with? What was the problem that you had to solve? So this example, engaging children in Saturday classes. A is the action. What did you do? What skills did you demonstrate? That's where you want to put in some of those action verbs about strategized, synthesized, created, facilitated. And so in this example, developed creative activities and use a customized approach to communication. Lastly, R is the result. This is the big part of the accomplishment statement. A lot of folks will talk about the challenge and the action unknowingly when they write their bullet points, but being explicit in what was the benefit, who was impacted, how did it happen? Can you quantify it or qualify it? Can you talk about specific numbers or pieces of feedback that you received? Even if not, and it's just children enjoyed classes, had fun, got correct answers, actually writing that out is going to look very impactful rather than just saying, oh, I taught classes. Say that you taught classes by doing these specific things that resulted in this. So if that sounds a little vague or fluffy, don't worry, have some examples coming up. This one is basically what we just saw. We saw the brainstorming, we saw the forming, and this is what it looks like. Bullet point. Taught English as a second language lessons to children using creative activities and adapting communication style to the needs of each child, resulting in improved test scores. A second example, addressed customer concerns and worked with agitated clients to resolve conflicts in a professional and courteous manner. These are both good examples of a bullet point that you might want to put under your different experiences. They might look a little long, and that is why I encourage you to have a few really impactful CAR statements or accomplishment statements rather than having 10 to 12 bullet points that are just a few words each listing, oh, well, these were my job duties. Having maybe a half dozen max bullet points under each experience is going to look very good. And the other thing to note is that the CAR statement doesn't necessarily have to be in the order of CAR. You can see in the second example, addressed customer concerns and worked with agitated clients. That's the action. Resolving conflict, or sorry, no, that was the challenge rather. But resolving conflicts is more of the result. Professional and courteous manner is the action that they took and the skills that they demonstrated. So you can put the result first, you can put the action first, it doesn't matter, as long as you're demonstrating all three of those things, that's explaining what the problem is that you solved, what skills or actions did you demonstrate, and what results did you accomplish. Tip number 5, completing the additional profile sections. This is everything from the courses taken, honors, awards, language certification, projects, volunteer work. I think there are a few frequently asked questions I get around these sections. One is around courses. People will often ask, should I just include every course I've taken at Western or at the post-secondary level? I usually advise away from that because as of the time of this recording, the way that LinkedIn displays your courses, it just shows them in a big list, but it only displays them 3 at a time and it automatically alphabetizes them. So even if you took a completely irrelevant course, it might show up at the top of the list and then you have to hit C3 more, C3 more, C3 more. So if you put up, 20 courses that you've taken as a Western student, a lot of the more relevant ones are going to become buried, and not a lot of people are going to spend time hitting show more, show more, show more to see every single one of those courses. An example that I gave is that when I was an undergraduate student, I took a course on Alexander the Great called Alexander the Great. And as a career coach, you can imagine that that course probably not the most relevant to advising or coaching people. But if I put that on my LinkedIn, which I did have it up there for a while, it was always the first course that people saw when they clicked on my profile. So if you are going to include courses, consider putting on ones that are always going to be extremely relevant. Another question I'm asked, and this is particularly relevant to the honors and awards section, is how recent does something have to be to put it on my profile? Can I include something from high school? Because I know that a lot of folks get a lot of awards in high school, and then you get to university and people just stop giving you as many awards, and it's a little tragic. But the answer that I give is that there isn't a good answer. There's no good rule of thumb. But I always say that a consideration to keep in mind is that the more impressive something is, the longer it can stay on your profile. And then the obverse of that, if something isn't all that impressive or it's super old, you may want to consider removing it. So if you got a participation trophy for 7th grade track and field day, probably don't want to include that because that's old and not that impressive. But if you graduated high school with a 99% average, that's very impressive. Even if you're graduating soon and it's been 4 or 5 years since that award, you may want to consider leaving it on your profile. Use your best judgment and what you think, is it relevant to what I'm applying for? Maybe I got the grade 8 math award, but if I want to be a mathematician, it might be relevant and useful and fun to have that award on your profile to show that from a young age you've been passionate about this field. So those are all questions to ask yourself, is how recent is this? How impressive is it? How relevant is it? And then going from there. Tip number 6 is to think broadly about your experience. And simply put, what I mean by this one is to consider how you want to put on your volunteer experience. A common question I get is, if I don't have that much work experience, how am I supposed to create a LinkedIn profile? What am I supposed to put on there? And put on your volunteer experience. You can see the stats on the slide on the screen. 20% of hiring managers have hired someone because of their volunteer experience, and 41% will consider volunteer experience on par with paid work experience. Simply put, if you did a volunteer role, especially one that is maybe an 8-month commitment, like being a SOF or on student council or involved in a club as an executive, those are almost year-long commitments that teach you a whole swath of skills and transferable competencies that a paid experience would as well. And so put those on your LinkedIn profile. Don't think that just because you weren't paid for something, it isn't a legitimate or meaningful experience. The other thing to consider is that you may even want to put those, rather than under the volunteering section on a LinkedIn profile, put them under your main experience. If it was a long experience, a long-term commitment that taught you a lot of things, you may want to consider just having that on par with the rest of your paid work experience. Nowhere does it say on LinkedIn paid experience, it just says experience. So consider how you want to organize your profile and what you want it to say. I know for myself that I had some unpaid yet relatively lengthy roles. I put them on my experience section, and then I left my volunteer section for more philanthropic things, such as, volunteering at an animal shelter or coaching or anything like that. Tip number 7 is to add skills that you can be endorsed for. Most people will add skills on their LinkedIn profile. It's relatively easy to do and it looks good. And again, keyword searches, but you also want to consider being endorsed for things and not adding too many skills. If I see someone who has 10 skills on their profile and they all have dozens of people endorsing them saying, yes, I've worked with this person, I can confirm they are good at public speaking, that is going to be a lot more impressive than someone who has 50 skills but no endorsements for any of them. You want to think about what's relevant to the types of jobs that you're going to be applying for, right? Look through job descriptions and they'll say, top skills, we need people who are innovative and creative and can work independently. You'll want to put those skills on your profile. Think about the field that you're going into and what's valued. You also are going to want to maybe consider, okay, I'm not the best at critical thinking right now, but I know that that's a skill that's important for the type of career that I would like. You can put it on your profile now and hope that you will develop and grow more into it later. Make it a focus of your professional development. That's okay. But again, keeping at the forefront the types of skills that are going to be valued in the field that you are looking at. Tip number 8, getting towards the end, is to add examples of your work. LinkedIn gives you the option to include attachments on just about every section, I think under experience, education, wherever. So if you have projects that you worked on that you want to show off, maybe you want to include a copy of a paper that you had published. Maybe you want to just include a link to a news article about you. You can put all that stuff on your profile, makes it more interactive, and what better way to show people the work that you are capable of than actually showing them some of that work. This is a feature that not a lot of folks take advantage of, myself included, to be honest, but it's something that I am looking towards working on, and I would encourage you to do the same. If you have any projects that you're proud of, I would encourage you to actually put them on your profile. Okay, those are the end of the formal tips. A few more other did you knows. The first one is that you can customize your LinkedIn URL. So rather than having a link to your profile be a random chain of letters and numbers that's automatically generated, you can claim it, you can edit it. It'll be on the right side, well, I should say on desktop. It'll be on the right side of your screen, just past your profile, where it will say, edit your custom URL. My last name is Malthaner, so I just took Malthan as my URL. It makes it a lot easier if you want to direct people to your LinkedIn, if you want to include it on a resume or a cover letter when you're applying to jobs. Looks really nice and neat and tidy. There really isn't a downside to doing this, so I highly recommend it. A question that I'll often get is, where do I set my location? Say I'm from Vancouver and I currently go to school in London. Obviously I'm at Western, but when I graduate, I want to go back out west. Do I put my location as British Columbia or Ontario, London or Vancouver? And I always encourage people, put it to the location where you would like to work. Simply put, a lot of recruiters or people on LinkedIn, they have like geographical radii that they can put in when they search and say, my company is headquartered here. I want to see all people within 50 kilometers who meet this skill set. And so if you have your location set in London, you might miss potential jobs or recruitment or other opportunities. So think carefully about where you want to put your location and where you would most like to work. And then last but not least, you can also edit your profile to show that you are open to jobs. So you can put it as I'm hiring if you're a hiring manager, or more likely I'm looking for a job. Show people, have it marked on your profile that yes, I'm open to jobs, I'm actively seeking, or I'm listening to offers, or whatever your current status is. These are other features, which are relatively new, and that is pronouns and pronunciation. So if you see that little speaker icon, that is a pronunciation of me pronouncing my name and telling everyone how it is said. That is something that you can add to your profile. You have to do it through the mobile version of the app. As of right now, you can listen to other people's recordings on desktop, but you cannot record it. If you have Android, Apple, iOS, it'll all work, and you can add that. Another thing is adding your pronouns if you prefer to be addressed as she, her, he, him, they, them, zer. You can add that. It is relatively new that it's a separate profile field. It used to just be some people would type it in after their name, but you can add it in here. Okay. Those are all the tips we have for editing your profile. If you follow all of those, I have no doubt that your profile will look beautiful and gorgeous, and you'll get tons of connection requests, and people will want to hire you. It'll be great. Obviously not a full guarantee, but you get the idea. So, again, one of the most common things that I am told is I have a LinkedIn profile, but I don't use it. I signed up for this website, I filled out some of my experiences, put up my degree, but I never go on it. So what is the actual point of LinkedIn? What do I do? There are a few things. One of the most common features, or I guess I should say popular features rather, is being able to read and share industry news. This is something that is incredibly helpful, especially if you are trying to enter an industry or just become a better professional. The example that I give is when I started in this role relatively early on, I went to a conference full of other career coaches, career educators, and of course, we all have LinkedIn profiles, and of course, we all started adding each other. And so now, whenever I go on LinkedIn, obviously, guess who's a pretty active crowd on LinkedIn is a bunch of career coaches. Every time I go in, my newsfeed now is full of interesting articles, blogs, podcasts, posts, discussion topics, etc. that help me stay up to date and be the best professional that I can be. You can also follow thought leaders or influencers. I always chuckle a little bit because a LinkedIn influencer conjures a very different image than a TikTok or an Instagram influencer, but that is essentially what they are. You can see this photo in the top right of Justin Trudeau. Yes, he has a LinkedIn profile. Yes, you can send a connection request. It will probably go ignored. However, you can follow. Even if you aren't connected with someone, you can follow them and see all of their posts. And these are people who usually post inspirational messages, good resources, links, etc. So I would recommend that, finding a few people who you find inspiring or helpful. You can follow certain companies or organizations. This is extremely helpful if there's a certain place that you would like to work, because anytime they're mentioned in the news, they're going to show up on your LinkedIn feed. They may post different articles. You can help find people who currently work at that company if you want to begin networking or researching. As well, a lot of companies, and I'd say more and more, are posting job openings on LinkedIn. So if you really want to work somewhere, you follow them in your feed, you will actually be alerted when they post a new job. So it is a very valuable tool. You can join groups and participate in discussions. That is the second photo we have in the bottom right. That is our Build a Meaningful Life and Career group, where people can talk all about life design and future planning and careers. And it's just very helpful to have an even more concentrated area to help connect with like-minded folks. In addition to, reading and sharing industry news in your newsfeed, actually going to a group can have some really rich discussions. It's a good way to find other people you may wish to connect with. And one quick tip about groups that's a very fun little hack is if you want to connect with someone, but you're kind of stuck on that initial message, you want to send them a note with the connection request, but you're being really hampered by that 240 character count. If you are in a mutual group with someone, you can send them as many unlimited messages as you want. So maybe you want to connect with someone, you can't get the note quite right, but you see what groups they're in. Join that group, look at the members, message them from there. Suddenly you have an unlimited character count. So that's very, very helpful. You can also publish long form posts on LinkedIn, become a bit of an influencer yourself. And I think more and more LinkedIn people are posting about lots of things. A lot of folks are averse to LinkedIn because they think it's nothing but people posting about, oh, I graduated, oh, I got a new job, and just bragging. And yes, it's a place to celebrate your accomplishments, but I'm finding a lot of people posting about all sorts of aspects, from graduating to entering the job market to negotiating salaries. And you never know, if you enter a post, what might end up blowing up a little bit or being shared around or going viral. So recommend it. It's also a great way to get your profile noticed if you are trying to be actively seen and recruited. You can search for jobs on LinkedIn. This is something that I don't think will surprise a lot of folks, but yes, there is a job board on LinkedIn, and yes, it is probably one of the better ones online, at least in my opinion, in terms of the filters that are built in and the alerts that you can set up and notification settings. It's very good because you can filter specifically by, I'm looking for full-time, part-time, internship, student work. You can even filter now by remote or in person or hybrid opportunities, different companies, different locations. Very, very good, very helpful. And then last but not least, one other thing you can do on LinkedIn is go to their help section. They have quite a few resources that are very good about how to use LinkedIn, how to get set up on LinkedIn, that I would highly recommend. If you're still maybe a little lost or you have a few questions after the workshop today, or you just want to go a little bit deeper, I would recommend that. So, one other quick thing, and that is how to research jobs and employees. This is, in my humble opinion, one of the best features on LinkedIn, maybe the best, and not a lot of folks know that it exists. So, what you're going to do is, and normally if this were a live workshop, I would demonstrate this in real time, but for the recording, maybe you want to just open up your LinkedIn and follow along with me in a new tab. But if you go to LinkedIn and then search for any school or any company, I of course recommend starting with Western so you can find alumni to connect with, but if you want to go directly to a company, that works too. And then along the top, you'll see tabs that are home, jobs, and then eventually you'll see people or alumni, depending on if it's a company or a school, respectively. If you go to the alumni tab, you'll see something that looks a bit like what's on the left side of your screen. It will show you the number of alumni. It'll give you the option to search by any sort of keyword, start and end year filters, as well as these boxes down below that talk about where they live, where they work, what they do, what they studied, how you're connected, and what they are skilled at. So there are a few different ways that you can use this. If you are on the job search and you want to find people within a specific industry or at a specific company, you can go to where they work or what they do, which will give you a list of companies or fields, and then that will show you everyone who studied at Western and works at that company. It is a great way to begin reaching out to contacts and having networking type conversations by saying, hey, you went to Western. I go to Western. I see you're a graduate of the Faculty of Music. I'm currently a music student. I want to learn more about how you got your current job. Let's have a conversation. It's a lot easier to have those types of chats when you have a bit of a connection, such as an alumni connection, or maybe you want to see what you're going to do with your career. You aren't necessarily looking to reach out to anyone, but you're saying, what the heck am I going to do with a degree in blank? You can go over to what they studied, put in that filter, or just type it in the general keyword search bar at the very tippy top, and then filter and see everyone's profile. You see a little bit at the bottom how it'll show you their headshot, their name, and their headline, as well as what they studied, class of 2020, philosophy. And then you can go through and look at all their different job titles, view their profiles. Remember, it's not creepy. And then go through and say, wow, all these people who have the same degree as me, these are all the different things that they're doing. And get ideas about different career paths or ways that you can go after you graduate. So that is the alumni search tool. Highly recommend it. Highly recommend playing around with it. And we do have other resources on our website. If you would like to learn more about that, look for those videos. Oh, and one more thing. Surprising myself with my own slides here. But if you are going to reach out, again, very similar, add a note, and again, say how you found them or what you're looking to connect over. So, hi Heidi, for example, I'm a current Western student and I found your profile as I was looking for FIMS graduates working in the field of broadcasting. I'm interested in connecting with you and learning more about your work and career post-Western. It doesn't have to be difficult or overly complicated, but those are the types of requests that you can send. I will mention that I acknowledge how daunting or intimidating it can be to reach out to strangers or begin those networking type conversations, but a lot of times it just comes down to how you phrase it. So if you approach someone and say, hey, we both went to Western, get me a job at TD, that's probably not going to go over too well. But if you come at it from a place of asking for directions and saying, hey, I noticed that we have this connection. You have a really cool job. I would love to hear more about your life story. I want to be you one day. Can you talk about yourself for half an hour? People are going to love that. I mean, maybe not that direct or that blunt, but people enjoy talking about themselves. So if you ask someone to share their story, share their experience, you're likely going to be received very well, much more so than if you ask about directly finding a job. So that is about it for the formal presentation part. Let's talk about some takeaways, and that is a quick recap of everything we talked about. Very first thing, LinkedIn is not your average social media. Remember the etiquette we talked about. Be professional and don't be afraid to contact strangers. View people's profiles. That is the entire purpose of the website. You'll want to create a profile to be seen and to make your profile excellent. Utilize sections like the headline or the about section. Think about skills that you can be endorsed for. Write those accomplishment statements. Add a nice photo. All the other things that we talked about. Tip number 3, how to actually use LinkedIn. Thinking about it as more than just an online resume. Thinking about advancing your career, connecting with people, following companies, applying for jobs, joining group discussions. And lastly, using some of those search tools that we just talked about, finding people who have things in common with you or that work where you want to work or studied what you want to study, or what you are studying rather, can be very, very helpful at every stage, whether you're in first year, you want to figure out where you want to go after, or if you're a current professional who wants to make a career change. Find people who work in that industry and then ask them about how they got into it. So, if you found this helpful, I really hope you'll consider exploring some of our other resources. We have more workshops just like this one, and we talk about everything from resume and cover letter preparation to designing a meaningful life, figuring out what you want to do with your degree, networking, job search strategies, interviews, all that sort of stuff. We have career appointments. Those are one-on-one conversations, confidential, with a career coach such as myself or one of my colleagues, and we can talk about literally anything career related, whether it's help me find a job, help me apply to grad school, help me find direction in my life. No guarantees, but we will do our best to help you with all of those things. We have our Employment Resource Center, and they give feedback on resumes, cover letters, and LinkedIn profiles. You want to take some of the tips that you learned in this workshop, take them away, and then send it to a stranger and say, hey, please give me some honest feedback. Just send them an email with a link to your profile. You'll get full written feedback within 3 days. Pretty helpful. And then last but not least, on our website, we also have some online resources. They are up to date and just podcasts, blogs, tools, and resources. Highly recommend checking us out. Again, career.uwo.ca. That is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching this workshop recording. Please follow us on social media if you feel so inclined, and happy LinkedIn. If anyone wants to try and find me after this and send me a connection request, I more than welcome it. Just remember, send a note. Take care.